We'll call the meeting to order, and pursuant to Standing Order 1082, subject matter of Bill C. Second Act to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on March 22nd, 2017, and other measures. And on this first hour, we have the Honourable Bill Morneau, Minister of Finance, and Deputy Minister, Mr. Rochon. Welcome. The floor is yours to start, Minister, and then we'll go to questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, honorary committee members, for the opportunity to be here with you today. I'd also like to thank all of you for your work on Budget Implementation Act 2 and for all the work that I know you've been doing on the pre-budget consultations. As you know, our government came to office with a plan to grow the middle class and to grow the economy. And Budget Implementation Act 2 is an important next step towards that goal. The bill will help to make the tax system simpler, fairer, more flexible, and efficient. La loi numéro 2 d'exécution.
The Budget Implementation Act number 2 also provides for giving workers under federal jurisdiction the right to request of their employers more flexible working conditions, which will be of great use to women who continue to bear the burden of most home care work in our society, which is not paid for.
Of unpaid internships in federally regulated sectors that aren't part of a formal educational program, and providing labour standard protections for unpaid interns who are part of an educational program. Mr. Chair, if you look at the measures in BIA 2, I think we can all agree that this legislation is an important step in our plan to build an economy that works for the middle class and for those who are working hard to join it. Before I speak about the next steps in our plan, I'd like to tell you about how we got to where we are today and the signs that tell us that our plan to build a stronger middle class and to grow the economy are working. Just 2 years ago, the world economy was still in recovery. Canadians were feeling like they were working harder than ever, but that they just weren't getting ahead. And there were grounds for their concerns. The median real wage income of Canadians had barely risen over the previous 30 years. Les Canadiennes et les Canadiens de la classe moyenne étaient...
Middle-class Canadians were concerned. They were worried. They were looking for real change. And they elected a government that had a plan to ensure that their hard work would be rewarded, a plan that would allow all Canadians to take good advantage of a growing economy.
There are clear signs that this plan is working. In just 2 years, we've lifted 26 long-term boil water advisories on reserve. Over 350,000 more students get help each year to afford books, tuition, and earn their degrees. We've effectively doubled the Canada Summer Jobs program, helping almost 65,000 students find work in the summer months. With the Canada Child Benefit, we've helped about 300,000 children.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
What's your point of order?
Yes, I understand the Minister was here to talk about the Budget Implementation Act. He's now mentioned several measures that are not actually in that Act, which with which I do not have a problem as long as that approach is applied equally to all members sitting around the table throughout the hearings today.
Well, I expect on the issues the Minister is talking about is certainly may not necessarily be in the Budget Implementation Act, but they are tied to the budgetary matters that the government has pursued over the last year. So I'll certainly allow the remarks, and there's fairly wide flexibility in what we allow to be asked at committee as well.
Great, thank you.
As long as we can stay away from the personal stuff, not get personal. Mr. Minister.
As I was mentioning, with the Canada Child Benefit, importantly, we've helped to lift about 300,000 children out of poverty. Consumer confidence is up, Mr. Chair, and this confidence is sustaining a rise in household spending and economic growth. The Canadian economy is now resurgent, with average growth of 3.7% over the last 4 quarters, making Canada the fastest-growing economy in the G7 countries. In just 2 years, over 500,000 jobs have been created, and the youth unemployment rate is near its lowest on record. And this growth is underpinning a significant upgrade to Canada's fiscal outlook, which has improved by over $6.5 billion compared to what we were expecting just in March. The federal debt-to-GDP ratio has been placed firmly on a downward track, and Canada continues to have the best fiscal position among G7 countries. These achievements are more than just numbers on a balance sheet. They mean a better country for ourselves and for our children. La situation budgétaire solide du Canada.
Solid budgetary situation here in Canada allows us to do what many other countries would like to do for themselves, to invest in ourselves and in our future while benefiting from the freedom to manage the uncertainty imposed by the world economy.
And their families, we have an immediate positive impact on the economy. The fall economic statement takes important next steps to ensure Canadians can share in the success we achieve as a country. We're taking action on the understanding that for Canadian families, shouldering the rising cost of raising children can be a real challenge. Our government proposes to strengthen the Canada Child Benefit by making annual cost of living increases to it starting in July 2018, 2 years ahead of schedule. For a single parent of 2 children making $35,000, a strengthened CCB will contribute $560 in the 2019-2020 benefit year towards the cost of raising his or her children. That means more support for purchases of books, skating lessons, warm clothes for winter, or what the family needs. By helping parents with the high costs of raising children, the CCB brings added confidence to families. It's proven to have an immediate positive impact on economic growth. Indexing the CCB for the 2018-19 benefit year will provide an additional $5.6 billion in support to Canadian families over the 2018-19 to 2022-23 period. And the help is going to where it's needed most. About 65% of families receiving the maximum Canada Child Benefit amounts are single parents, of whom 90% are single mothers. For those working hard to join the middle class, many of those who are living alone will offer even more help with an increase to the working income tax benefit. This increase of $500 million per year is on top of the increase of about $250 million annually, which already is set to come into effect in 2019 as part of the enhancement of the Canada Pension Plan. It'll give a much-needed boost to over 1.5 million low-income workers as they work long hours, sometimes in more than one job, to get a foothold in the workforce and support themselves and their families. Nos nouveaux investissements dans la prestation.
Our new investments in the working income tax benefit will allow us to better support those who receive the benefit by improving the highest benefits and allowing a larger number of people to take advantage of it.
Stronger CCB and a more generous working income tax benefit means more peace of mind when the bills come due. With the fall economic statement, we're also providing direct support to the small businesses who create the jobs that Canadians depend upon. Nous avons établi un équilibre qui...
We have established a balance between strong economic growth by allowing small Canadian companies to keep a larger part of their revenues to reinvest it and to create jobs, while still ensuring that these benefits do not fall solely to the richest of Canada.
Small business tax rate to 10%, effective January 1st, 2018, and to 9%, effective January 1st, 2019. This means up to $7,500 in federal corporate tax savings per year to help entrepreneurs and innovators to do what they do best. Our plan for middle-class tax fairness will ensure that incorporated professionals and business owners can continue to have the flexibility to save up for personal reasons, such as parental leave or for retirement, while ensuring that the measures are focused on a small number of high-income individuals who get the biggest advantage from existing rules. And we'll work with farmers, fishers, and business owners to better accommodate the transfer of a family business to the next generation while protecting the fairness of the tax system. In everything we do, our government knows that when Canadians are given a real and fair chance at success, they'll make the most of it. The investments we're making point to a brighter future for Canadians. As we look to budget 2018, we'll continue our work to build on the gains we've made over the last 2 years. Nous nous assurerons que les Canadiens pourront bénéficier.
Will ensure that Canadians can make use of their capacities and the trainings possibilities that they need to remain competitive and to prosper in the rapidly changing world economy.
Making big bets in the most competitive sectors of our economy, making Canada a world leader in industries like agri-food, clean tech, and digital. We'll continue investments in our transit, our roads, and in clean water to keep our cities moving and our children safe. And we'll continue building a better future for the middle class, those working hard to join it, and those who will follow in their footsteps. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Minister, and we'll go to 7-minute rounds for the first 4, starting with you, Mr. Fergus.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président, et puis merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Honourable Minister and Deputy Minister, for your presentation today. Discussing, of course, BIA 2, the Budget Implementation Act 2017. After the information sessions that we have had and the testimonies we've heard before the committee, and of course what we've heard from our own electors, something that's quite clear with this bill is that we now have a taxation, excise tax system and GST and HST regime that is much more effective than it was in the past. Could you tell us something about the measures that you believe are making our tax regime more effective, especially in regard to GST and HST?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for your question. As you know, 2 years ago we decided to do our best to ensure that we have a taxation regime that works well, that is more efficient indeed, and that can also become more fair. A year and a half ago, I had an expert council help me think through the issues in our taxation system that are not working as well as we would like at present. And there are some measures in the budget reflect our interaction with that expert team. We have found some important things to change, and we will continue to offer new measures to support our system to ensure it becomes fairer and that it also encourage investment in the future. The most important things that we have done were undertaken a couple of weeks ago following a long consultation to improve the system, ensuring that it become fairer and to help small and medium-sized enterprises have more money to invest in their future. Indeed, another thing that we have heard tell of and that we've had testimony about, specifically from a company that produces beer, Molson Coors, came here before this committee as a witness to explain how tax on beer was a measure that actually is appreciated in that sector because it will make the system more efficient and will also make for a level playing field. I would imagine that this is the only company that has been expressing its approval of these measures. Based on your consultations, could you tell us whether this initiative has been well received by the sector, the beer sector? We do feel that has been well received, that the measure was an important one, the one that you're bringing up. What I can tell you is that it is clear that we do need a system that does not allow for double taxation, and that counted for that sector. The measures you're mentioning ensure that now, across the different types of beer, there's a single way of proceeding and of taxing which is fair to all. So it's much better for them, for that sector. It's also better for consumers. It's helpful for them to be able to purchase any beer they wish at the same tax rate. Thank you very much. 2 more questions for you, and I hope I will have time to ask both of them. The first refers to Part 5 of Division 1, the Bretton Woods agreements and other agreements linked to that, and in particular, how we could have Canada able to take certain action. Could you tell Canada why we are changing our powers in this regard by changing the law? We wanted to make sure that the power of the Minister of Global Affairs be real, and it's merely to ensure that the responsibilities and powers apply. That's what the measure intends to accomplish, and I think that in governance matters, this will be the right approach. And one last question. I'm sorry, yes, here I am. And of course, the government will be undertaking to legalize marijuana use. And I've seen that in the Budget Implementation Act, there is some leeway provided for creating the structure to allow for these changes. And I think it's certainly wise to prepare for the day when we will eventually legalize cannabis use. Could you tell me a little bit about the flexibility that you would like to foresee in negotiations with the provinces and territories? Yes, right now, in matters of legalizing cannabis, it is important to have a taxation system that will work. Our aims are clear. We want taxation which is in line with our aims. It's quite important to know that it's difficult for people who aren't in a position to obtain the cannabis they may need. It's also important to ensure that the price of cannabis, including taxation, is at an appropriate level. We need to negotiate with provinces to reach a conclusion about the way to go forward on this and the level of taxation, and that's why we do need the authority to do so. And this is something that certainly counts for us, and we will be undertaking discussions in the coming months to reach an agreement.
Poilievre, 7 minutes, a little more.
In what year will the budget be balanced?
As we've shown each year, we've shown the ongoing trajectory to be fiscally responsible by reducing the amount of debt to our GDP over time.
In what year will the budget be balanced?
As I've said, we think it's important to be fiscally responsible and to have a balanced approach to managing our economy. And that is exactly the approach we've taken. Happily, it's working with a high level of growth, and it's showing that we can make investments in our long-term future and do it in a fiscally responsible way.
And in what year will the budget be balanced?
And as I've said, the approach that we've taken is one that has demonstrably worked. The economy is growing much faster than it was, of course, when we came into office. After the previous government left us with a
in what year will
very
the
low rate of growth.
budget be? In what year will the budget be balanced?
I would be pleased to continue to have the same response to the same question, and that is that we believe that having a balanced approach to
What about a balanced budget? When will that happen?
We will continue to make investments on behalf of the long-term future of Canadians.
You promised in
that's
2019
working.
you'd have a balanced budget. Will you balance the budget in 2019?
We will continue to make investments that we see are appropriate to grow our economy, and happily that's working.
And when
we'll
will the budget be balanced?
And we'll continue to do that in a fiscally responsible way.
Okay, so the minister doesn't know when the budget will be balanced. On to his increases in taxes on small businesses. He says small businesses will be allowed to have $50,000 in passive income before his new penalties kick in. Is that $50,000 per shareholder or $50,000 per company?
Perhaps I can start by setting the record straight. In fact, we're reducing taxes on small businesses.
Okay.
So by moving forward on reductions that will move small businesses from where they are at federal taxation rate currently of 10.5% to 9%.
On the issue of the passive investment income, you've said that you're going to allow small businesses to earn $50,000 of passive income before new tax penalties take effect. Is that $50,000 per shareholder or $50,000 per company?
Well, perhaps I can step back and conclude what I was saying, which is that we will be reducing the taxes on small businesses. And so by January 1st, 2019, the federal rate of tax on small businesses will be 9%. And we'll do that at the same time as we assure that small businesses don't provide opportunities that are really not intended to be there for growth, but
fair enough. But the 50,000, you said that small businesses will be allowed to earn $50,000 in passive income before new taxation, new tax measures will affect them. Is that $50,000 per shareholder or $50,000 per company?
Just to come in here, Mr. Minister, let's not try and interrupt each other. I'm watching the time. The ministers are around, can be around equal time to the question asked, so there's no need interrupting each other. If we can do that, please. Go ahead, Mr. Minister.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, was I interrupted?
No, you weren't. Mr. Poilievre was, but that's
sorry,
fine.
I just wanted to be clear.
Yeah.
The goal that we've set out is an important one, we believe, which is to make sure that incorporating only for the opportunity to defer income is not our goal. Our goal is to ensure people invest actively in their business. And as such, we've said that there will be a limit in terms of the amount of income that can be deferred within a private corporation. And that amount will be approximately $1 billion in assets if you look at the $50,000 of investment income. And that we believe is something that will allow our system to be enabling people to invest, at the same time not creating advantages for those that are already quite successful.
Yes, go ahead.
The minister is running my clock. He can run his own clock during his opening statement, but I've asked very short, pointed questions seeking factual answers, and he's not answering them. So I asked for the ability to restate the question.
State the question.
Thank you. Is that $50,000 per shareholder or $50,000 per company?
As I said earlier, we think this is important. We believe that it's important.
Do you know the answer to the question, or because if I could revert to your interview on CBC's The House, you were asked a similar question, and you said that quote, those details had not been worked out. But it's not a detail, Minister. If a company has 10 shareholders and that company is only allowed to have $50,000 in passive income, then that's actually $5,000 in passive income per person. I don't know on what planet one would have to live to think that $5,000 a year in passive income is enough for a business owner to pay for a retirement or maternity leave or for some other eventuality. But I'm just asking that you answer the question because there are a lot of small business people who desperately need answers, and you've been immersed in this matter now for 100 days. You should know by now what your policy is. Is it is your limit on passive investment going to be $50,000 per company or $50,000 per shareholder?
Minister, the floor is yours.
I think now I have a fair bit of time, given the length of the diatribe. Yes. As I said, we think it's important to make sure that our system works. We have a small business rate that we think will be hugely advantageous for small businesses to invest in their active business. And at the same time, we want to make sure that we don't create a deferral opportunity for people in those companies that's not related to the active investment in their business, or for that matter, related to their legitimate needs to perhaps take off maternity leave or to build up retirement because the RSP system doesn't work effectively for them given their needs to invest in their business.
So you don't know if it's $50,000 per company or $50,000 per shareholder. You just don't know.
I'm pleased to continue.
Go ahead. Floor is yours.
So our goal in doing that was to put in place a measure that would limit the amount per company that people would be able to invest in their business, and or not to invest in their business, but to keep passively inside their business for potential future investments or potentially for the retirement. We will be releasing more complete details about this in our budget 2018, so that there's absolute clarity for businesses moving forward. But we know that what we've done is create an opportunity for people to invest at a good rate in their business, and to have the ability to save for their long-term needs at the same time.
Last question.
So I think the minister may have accidentally answered the question at a brief moment during his last statement. He seemed to suggest that it was $50,000 per company. So that does mean that in a situation which is relatively normal, that there are, say, 10 shareholders who jointly own a small business, whether a restaurant or a landscaping company, that they'll only have $5,000 per shareholder, per business owner, in passive income before his new double taxation takes effect on those people. Does he really think it's fair to hit people who are earning only $5,000 per year in passive income with tax rates that are far higher than would be paid by, say, Morneau Shepell on its passive income?
Okay, that's the last question. Mr. Minister.
We know that getting our economy going means that we need to continue to enable small businesses to invest in their business. We also need to make sure that they have the capacity to save for things that they might need to save for, whether it's retirement or for maternity leave. So creating that balance was important for us. What we've done by lowering the small business tax rate is given the opportunity for small businesses to invest more. What we've done for a company as well is given them the capacity to save passively for those eventualities. Of course, any active investments will continue to be at that low rate. What we will do is we'll provide absolute clarity for people in Budget 2018. For those 85% of businesses that don't have any passive investments, of course, they're not thinking about this right now. But for all businesses, we want to make sure that they have the capacity to invest at the small business rate, to save appropriately, and continue to create success for themselves and their families.
Mr. Dussault.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Minister, Mr. Rochon, for your presence. I'm particularly interested in revenue, since we're talking about the budget. When we talk about revenue, I'm talking about the Income Tax Act, for which you're responsible, and that's why Bill C-63 has about 10 pages amending the Income Tax Act. Now, I wanted to ask you this, considering that in direct investments by Canadians abroad, the countries in which Canadians invest the most money, there's a list of 10 countries. The third is Barbados, the fourth, Luxembourg, fifth, Cayman Islands, sixth, Bermuda, seventh, the Netherlands, and ninth, the Bahamas. That's the list of the 10 countries in which Canadians invest the most abroad. I'm interested in Barbados, which is third on the list. In 2016, Canadians invested $68.3 billion in that country, in Barbados, in 1 year, 2016. As Minister of Finance, can you give us an idea of what those investments are in Barbados to the tune of $68.3 billion? Of course, I can't explain every investment by each Canadian. That's something very specific. But what I can say is that it's very important for us to ensure that Canadians pay their fair share of taxes. That's very important. And that's why, from the outset, in our government, we tried to make sure that there are ways to make sure that's the case. We did many different things, as you know. The important things that we've done up until now are the common reporting standards. That's a way for us to ensure that we can see the accounts of Canadians in other countries. That's very important. That started a few months ago, 4 months ago. So that's very important. And that gives us some sense of where there is a potential challenge or opportunity to decide what we could do. We reached an agreement with the OECD to ensure that we don't have companies that make a profit in one country, Canada, and pay taxes in another country. That's very important too. Yes, but Mr. Chairman, I don't know why we're talking about fighting tax evasion. I just asked whether how can you make a link with tax evasion here? I'm asking what our economic ties with Barbados are, why there are these kinds of investments. Why are you making a linkage with tax evasion? Well, usually that's the question. That's why I'm explaining that it's important for us to consider situations in other countries. Now, if you want very specific information about the exact investments in Barbados, I don't have that information right now, but we could get it. Well, I'd appreciate it if your officials could provide an overview, at least, a general overview of the kinds of investments in Barbados. That would be very interesting. The one thing I can say here is that these 6 countries have one thing in common. They all have tax arrangements, and these figures keep going up and up every year. And that's why it's be good to look at these tax agreements. You voted for an NDP motion to review these double taxation conventions. So where are you in this review? What agreements have you reviewed up until now with Barbados, Luxembourg, the Bahamas, Barbados, Bermuda, the Cayman Islands? We will continue to work with other countries, with multilateral institutions, to ensure that the BEPS project works. That's very important work. There's no doubt that it's difficult to look at each individual investment. But our goal is to get the information and consider the situation and make sure that people here, companies here, pay their fair share of taxes. Okay, thank you. To go on about that, because to my mind, this doesn't seem to work very well. Base erosion and profit shifting doesn't seem to work well because the figures keep going up. You said that all companies should be on an equal footing and pay their equal share of taxes, their fair share of taxes. Recently, your colleague, the Minister of Canadian Heritage, signed a $500 million deal with Netflix that continues to be exempt from collecting taxes on its goods and services. The GST, it's exempt. I'm not the one saying so. Even the Quebec Finance Minister said it again today. This company gets an exemption from the federal government and doesn't have to pay or collect GST. Quebec has made a commitment to correcting that situation and has asked the company to collect GST like every other company. So I'd like to know whether you would commit today to doing the same thing. The Minister of Canadian Heritage threw the ball in your court and saying tax questions are the bailiwick of the finance minister. So my question is for you, Minister. Will you commit to ask these companies to collect those taxes, the GST, like every other company in Canada? There's no exemption. We base our tax decision on the budget. If there is a decision by the Quebec government to do something, of course, we will work with that government because they are the administrators of the system. But we clearly stated that the situation is significant for Quebec. That's their decision. But why are you saying there's no exemption then? A company that is Canadian, that has its headquarters in Canada, that does business in Canada. You go to the corner market here in Ottawa, you will pay HST or GST on services or goods. So why is it that Netflix, that sells a product or service, does not have to collect that tax from consumers? Why are you saying they're not exempt right now? How do you explain that?
Nous avons expliqué que nous voulons.
We explained that we wanted to do something in addition to what we did with Netflix. Of course, if Quebec wants to do something, we will work with Quebec. That's how our system works. We'll see. That will be the future.
I believe, Minister, you were going to get back to us with an overview of the kind of investments that were made in Bermuda, was it? Or Barbados. Mr. Sabera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bienvenue cet après-midi, Monsieur le Ministre.
Welcome, Minister. An update for our government and the middle class. I'm very pleased to say that the economic growth rate is very strong for our economy, over 4% growth, 500,000 new jobs.
When we entered into office, we brought in the Canada Child Benefit, and I was pleased to see the numbers in my riding of over 16,000 children, 9,000 payments, for a total sum of $4.3 million that are going to families in my riding that need it. Not the millionaires, but actual low and middle income families that need it for their everyday necessities, putting their kids in school. And with that measure, we saw that the Bank of Canada governor noted that the economy was boosted 0.5% with the CCB, and we've indexed it now. Moving on from the CCB to innovation. In Bill C-63, there are measures for clean technology, boosting the Business Development Bank, capital in there, and an investment of approximately $1.4 billion in new financing through BDC and EDC to help Canada's clean technologies firms grow and expand. I wanted to get your comments on just how important not only helping middle-class families through the CCB and indexing the CCB, but also through an innovation agenda so we can boost the capacity of our economy to grow. Thank you.
Well, thank you. First of all, just commenting on your starting point in your question, we are clearly seeing the benefits of investing in Canadians. It's quite clear that what we move forward on in terms of putting more money in Canadians' pockets through tax reductions for middle-class Canadians, through an increase in Canada Child benefits, actually put more disposable income in families' hands. And that has served as an important part of the increased growth that we've seen in our economy. So our plan, which was to have confidence that Canadians would invest in our economy by taking that money and helping their families, has worked. We do know that, as you say, we now also need to be assuring that the long-term future of our country is successful. And that means investing in innovation, in making sure that we have the kind of research and development that's going on that will lead to future success, and that make sure that Canadians have the kinds of skills that they'll need for jobs of the future. So what we saw in Budget 2017 was significant investments in Canadians, in innovation through superclusters, putting universities and leading businesses and small businesses together to find ways for us to create even more advantage in already strong sectors. That'll be our continuing approach, thinking about how we can help with the R&D and how we can prepare Canadians for the jobs of the future. That's going to be how we'll make sure that this success that we've seen is continued for the next generation.
Okay. Thank you. On the issue of tax fairness, we've cut taxes for middle-class Canadians, I think approximately 9 million of them, and raised taxes for our wealthiest 1%. In the last measure we introduced, and I applaud this measure, reducing the small business tax rate to 9%. Firms will benefit up to $7,500 and lower taxes that they can use to invest, grow the economy. And I know my colleague on the other side mentioned about passive investments, but isn't it a fact, Mr. Minister, that a passive investment of $1 million, approximately 98% of small businesses from coast to coast to coast are unaffected with that proposed change? That this change will only impact literally less than 2% of CCPCs across Canada, that their local restaurant, the local bakery, the plumber are all unaffected, and that this measure is based on tax fairness and will grow the economy to incentivize capital to be put to work.
You know, I don't think we can say it often enough. 100% of small businesses in this country will be positively impacted by a reduction in the small business tax rate. So every single business that earns $500,000 or less in annual profits will have a lower small business tax rate. It will go down on January 1st, 2018. It will go down again on January 1st, 2019. For the 1.7% of those private corporations that are shielding significant income and passive investments, yes, they may go over that $1 million in future, but let's think about that. First of all, every single investment in any small business that's existing there right now will be protected. Nobody will be having any change tax situation on any investments they've accumulated in their private corporation, and it's only in future that they will be able to continue to invest up to roughly $1 million. Before then, they would probably decide to instead put money into an RSP or a TFSA. So we found a balance that ensures every small business will have lower taxes, and that for almost all businesses, that they will continue to be able to invest in passive investments to assure their retirement or maternity leave, and that we will end up with more investment in active businesses because it will be advantageous for businesses to do so, especially at the lower rate.
Okay, we'll turn to 5-minute rounds, and Mr. Albus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Minister, thank you for being here today. Minister, you told the Senate committee recently that you were planning on investing, or I should say spending, $1.2 billion more in the CRA in preparation for the small business tax changes. Why would you be needing to put more money if you were not complicating the code so that the bureaucrats that will end up interpreting that code will have to spend more time and thus more resources on it?
Well, that's incorrect. I informed the Senate committee that we had made investments in Canada Revenue Agency over the last 2 years of roughly $1 billion in each of 2016 budget and 2017 budget. We allocated more money to the Canada Revenue Agency in order to ensure that we were going out and making sure that there was not tax evasion going on. So that investment has to be considered in light of the broader concern that people pay their fair share. In no way did I say or infer, or if I did, I certainly did not intend to, that there would be any needed investment required for anything that we're doing in the regard in which you mentioned.
Okay, I'd like to go then to what Mr. Poilievre had originally talked to you about on a per-company basis. So to be clear, you're saying on a per-company basis, the $50,000 would apply. Is that correct?
To be clear, all investments that any Canadian-controlled private corporation have currently in their entity will be protected.
Okay, but my question was, though, you said it on a per-company basis, it would be at $50,000. It would not be on a per-shareholder basis, $50,000. Is that correct?
As I said, in the first instance, everything that they've done up till now is protected. And in future, of course, any investments that they make will be from a bigger pool of profits because their taxes will have gone down. So they will be able to invest in their business, their active business, at exactly the same way they've done it in the past, but with more funds because of the lower tax rate. And they will be able to maintain passive investments in their entity of up to about $1 million.
So again, if it's on a per company basis, then basically that encourages people to incorporate because you have the lower rate. Isn't that the exact opposite of what you said in your July 18th paper? That you felt that the trend of going from 1.3 million Canadian-controlled private corporations to 1.8 was a problem and that needed to be solved? Aren't you, in fact, now encouraging the exact opposite, Minister?
In fact, we strongly support small businesses in this country. We are pleased if people are starting up small businesses. What we want to make sure is the investments in those businesses with that low rate are actually into the active business. So what we've done is we've created an advantage for people to invest in the active business by lowering the tax rate. And at the same time, we've created a window of opportunity for them to have passive investments as well, so that they can manage their way while having that small business between.
Well, Minister, you haven't created any windfall for anyone. It's their work. It's their retained earnings. So I appreciate you look at it as being yours. But again, if you go with a per company, that does encourage more corporations. Obviously, the criticism has been out that if you lower the small business tax rate, that you'll encourage more corporations. Minister, what you were trying to solve initially was to stop people from incorporating, doesn't this very policy do that?
In fact, what we have said was that we were trying to make sure that our tax system both encourages investments and doesn't create advantages for those already advantaged. So by lowering the small business tax rate, we are encouraging active investment in business, and by creating an opportunity for people to have passive investments up to a threshold, we are ensuring that we're not creating advantages only for the few. So finding a balance is important, and we think we found a balance that will stimulate investment at the same time is not creating a tax advantage only available to a very small subset. Of course, as mentioned earlier, about 1.7% of businesses that might ever, of small incorporated entities that might ever get to that limit.
So, Minister, in C63, one of the first measures that's in here is changes to work in progress, or sometimes called bill-based accounting, which basically will force lawyers and other professionals, if they're working on contingency cases, to pay taxes every year. Minister, do you realize that in some cases, in small rural areas, where they are not overly serviced by large law firms that can subsidize these kinds of cases, that you will in fact make it more difficult for people that are on the margin that have legitimate cases but may not be a slam dunk case to have their legal representative? Your own parliamentary secretary has said in the House of Commons that he is sensitive to these changes. We had MP McKay, a lawyer as well, say that there are challenges with the approach. Minister, are you concerned that this will actually make it more difficult for people to get representation?
Mr. Minister.
We've spent some time on this issue. Of course, for other professionals, the law to ensure that people have their revenue and expenses in the same time period was changed in the early 1980s. We believe that the approach we've come to is one that makes sense, that treats this profession, the legal profession, like other professions. We worked with the various legal associations to make sure that we have the implementation effective in this regard. And by moving the transition from what was originally considered to be a 2-year transition to a 5-year transition, we believe that we've found a way to both get at the objective, which is a tax system that's consistent for people in different kinds of enterprises, and one that allows a transition for those organizations that have work in process that they need to fold into their activities in a reasonable fashion.
Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here. Mr. Rochon, thank you as well. I want to talk about Bill C-63 in terms of some of the items contained in here. So, nurse practitioners, we heard witnesses yesterday and how important making this change to allow nurse practitioners to provide, to fill out forms for their patients. And for me, I come from a semi-rural riding, so it is not always easy, and certainly many Canadians have in even more rural than my riding. Can you maybe speak to why this change is important and what you anticipate the impacts will be?
Well, thank you for the question. We think this is a really important change. Obviously, we are facing demographic challenges in this country that are going to continue to make the provision of health care challenging. We recognize that in many cases people will need to have a doctor to provide services for them in their healthcare situation, but in many cases nurse practitioners can play an important role. So this measure was really to acknowledge that as an important issue moving forward. We believe that by doing this it will create opportunity for our system to be more cost effective, and also to give people the appropriate level of care that they need from the appropriate provider. It's recognizing expertise where expertise exists and being efficient at the same time, which is a very positive outcome.
Thank you. And I want to also speak to testimony that we heard yesterday from witnesses in terms of specified cooperative income and the changes that were made for fishers, farmers in co-ops. I know this is something that was raised by the chair as well, and yesterday the witnesses said it was a welcome change. Can you maybe elaborate as to, I'm assuming it's based on consultations or what you heard to make this change and where this came from?
We did during the course of our consultations hear that in cooperatives there was a specific challenge that they had put their businesses together, and farmers and fishers were often in this situation in order to make it more efficient for themselves to actually conduct their business, and that any change in their ability to have a small business corporation with the limits that small businesses actually have would have actually caused the potential collapse of their cooperative. So we listened and realized that not all businesses are run exactly the same, that there was a legitimate approach to managing these cooperatives that were creating economic advantage, that we think is important, and found a way to assure that they could continue on with the appropriate approach to taxation in their situation.
Thank you. And lastly, then, because I think the chair is giving me the look, one of the Canadian or Canada Labour Code changes in Part 5, Division 8, we heard from officials when we reviewed this section. This is in regards to unpaid leave for victims of family violence up to 10 days. I think it's a really important initiative, and part of the language, the officials did a really great job in terms of explaining the process, and really the intention was to ensure that victims or their direct family members can seek help, or in some cases medical attention right away, and then in terms of dealing with whatever the longer term implications with their employer. But this really allows for that quick access to care in a lot of cases. We've also heard in previous testimony, I believe it was on the pre-budget consultation, the cost to the economy, the cost to employers as a result of domestic violence and family violence. So can you maybe speak to this initiative and why this is so important to start making these changes in the Canada Labour Code?
Well, we believe that it's important to acknowledge challenges, to address them, to find a way to assure that that Canadians can address their individual situations and the challenges, and not suffer work penalties as a result of that. So this really came out of that, an acknowledgement that having unpaid family responsibility leave is just an acknowledgement of the reality of today's much more challenging, fast-paced economy, that people that are in a situation where they are a victim of family violence are in need of time, and that's actually going to produce, hopefully, what we would expect would be a better situation for them than if they weren't accorded with that ability to take that time. And all of these efforts are really with that objective in mind, getting the labor code up to date with the reality of both family situation and the challenges that we face today. Acknowledging that, we think, will create a healthy situation within organizations and a healthier economy over the long term.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Kamish.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Minister, I want to talk about Division 2 in Bill C-63, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank Agreement Act that is being ratified by this. You must know this. Your officials came to committee and they said that every single project that this bank had approved thus far had received a human rights review, an environmental review, every project and every project being proposed. So you must know that there's 2 pipeline projects that have received funding and are receiving a loan from this bank that Canada is now putting $375 million US into. And you also must know your government canceled and made it impossible for 2 pipeline projects to proceed in Canada. So how can you justify wasting $375 million US, gifting to China this money for their middle class, when you have hard-working energy families in Alberta, Saskatchewan, British Columbia, who are out of work and looking to their government to support them in their time of need, instead of financing China's middle class?
Well, let me start by saying how important it is that we continue to work in our country to assure the success of people in challenging situations. Certainly, the economy in Alberta has had real challenges because of the change in oil prices. We recognize that. Pleased to see that it's doing somewhat better today, but we know we have a lot more that we need to be doing together. Similar to Saskatchewan, facing real challenges. So our continuing goal is to is to work to make sure that, that we have the ability to move our resources to market. That will be of continuing importance
Minister,
for us.
pardon me, Minister, but this $375 million US is going to 2 pipeline projects. It will support these loans that this bank will give in the future. These are competitors to Canada's natural gas, to our LNG projects in the future. We do not need to be part of the bank in order to bid, for Canadian companies to bid on projects. So how do you justify spending $375 million US of Canadians' taxpayer dollars when you could have just put that money towards infrastructure in Canada?
So as I was saying, we take very seriously the responsibility of working on the important issues we have in our country. We also see that it's important to be part of international institutions, as we have been historically. So whether it's at the IMF or the World Bank, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank is important. We have a share there, which is roughly equivalent to $200 million US. That is the share that we will be able to take up there. Unfortunately, we won't be able to take up our full economy's share, which we have been able to with other institutions because we are late in the game. But we do believe it's important to be a member of the international community to help to assure that the global economy is working. Having a seat at the table at the Asian Infrastructure Bank will be important. Those investments by helping the global economy will be important for Canada, and our goal will be
Minister,
to
just because
continue.
You're going off track a little bit here. You haven't justified yet spending $375 million of U.S. of Canadian taxpayer dollars. That money could have easily been used to support middle-class Alberta energy workers. You haven't justified the money. You've said about multilateralism and working with our what amounts to our competitors. This furthers China's foreign policy. Academics, professors, China's foreign spokesperson for the different ministries say this openly, is to further their One Belt, One Road initiative. So I'm just asking you, why are we financing competitor markets when we did not need to do so before, when Canadian companies were able to bid on these projects before, and we did not need to spend this money in the first place?
Again, just so that we're clear on the facts, we are going to make an investment of $200 million into the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. That is the US dollar amount. And it gives us, as we said, a seat at the table. It will allow Canadian businesses to be part of the investment opportunities. It will allow us to be at the table to consider what sort of projects will be taken on by that institution, as we are at the World Bank and as we are at the International Monetary Fund, as we are at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. So we are looking forward to that as an important part of the international institutions.
Thank you, Minister, and we'll go into the second round with this 5-minute question and then move to subs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here. Much appreciated. Minister, how many jobs were created in the last 2 years in the Canadian economy?
We, of course, are most of all concerned with creating jobs for Canadians. And in the last 2 years, we've passed now the 500,000 new jobs created in this country, getting us to a rate of unemployment that hasn't been seen in more than a decade.
And Minister, I come from Brampton East, which is a middle-class riding, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of small businesses, and they're really happy about the small business tax rate. I also want to talk, yesterday I was at Loblaws speaking to their carriers, so their third-party trucking companies, and one of the things I got back from them was that, Canada is such a big country, and they're transporting goods all across this country, and they were excited to know the details of the Canada Free Trade Agreement. Can you elaborate how that's going to even strengthen our economy even more and make it more efficient for small businesses to do business across Canada?
Well, what I would say is that breaking down internal trade barriers in this country is of huge importance. So we've made progress in this regard, and we're pleased with that progress. We still have more to do. We know that finding a way to enable us to work together across the country with lower trade barriers will create economic opportunities that we wouldn't have otherwise. So we've made progress again, but that is a continuing issue that our government will take seriously, because we know that we can create more economic growth by breaking down those barriers.
And Minister, I know my colleague asked this question, but I think it's really important. As somebody that interned in university and during law school, I want to make sure that we're achieving the balance between providing young students the opportunity to intern, to gain those experiences, but at the same time protecting our young Canadians from being taken advantage of in the unpaid internship space.
We recognize how important it is to give young people the kind of opportunities that they need coming out of a university or college, or sometimes out of high school. We also recognize that allowing unpaid internships creates a potential challenge for people that have less economic means. So if your family happens to be well off, an unpaid internship can provide you with a good work experience, but that might not be the same opportunity for someone of lesser means. So we wanted to make sure that the internships that are unpaid are only really there as part of a formal educational program, but that overall we seek to encourage companies, organizations, governments to make sure that internships are paid. People should be paid for doing their work, and that will create a better playing field and a more equal playing field for people from all economic backgrounds to be successful as they seek their first.
Thank you, Mr.
Cut it there and turn to supplementary estimates, and we will. I'm not sure if you have an opening statement here, Minister. Do you have a very short one?
Just that I'm delighted to be here for supplementary estimates, Mr. Chair.
That is good. And we'll have to go to 5-minute rounds on this one. It's my fault that we were a little late starting. I had in my mind committee was going to be at 3:30, so my apologies. So to start with, Mr. McLeod, we'll go to 5-minute rounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Minister for being here. I wanted to, as the person from the north, not Northern Ontario or Manitoba, but Northwest Territories, the only true northern person sitting around this table. I wanted to bring us some attention to some of the challenges we have in the north. For many years, I sat as a minister with the government of Northwest Territories, and we really experienced many times the shock of being left out of investments when the government would come forward with their budgets, and we'd have to rush to Ottawa to try to get a carve-out because the money was invested in the north on a per capita basis. We have a small population, we have high cost. These things were not factored in. I'm hoping that you're going to keep an eye on some of these challenges that we have. We are working on a northern strategy, a new northern strategy. The northern strategy provided by the previous government was military focused. That doesn't help us in our communities. Our communities are in crisis situations with housing, with jobs, and many other things. In the SUP, we talk about access to skill development and training for Indigenous people, and we also talk about adult basic education in the north. I'm hoping these things are going to get some priority, and I'm hoping that we're going to develop a good strategy, because we need a plan. And however, as part of that plan, we're going to look at an economic chapter, but I don't know if that's going to be enough. I'm wondering if you would think that we need to sit down and develop a whole new vision, a whole northern vision with a economic focus for all of the northern territories. I'm saying territories, not northern provinces.
Well, I just want to, obviously thank you for pointing out how important it is that we have a strategy for each part of the country, and one that considers the particular challenges of Canadians that live in northern parts of the country. So So I think all I can say is it's important for us to continue to do that. I'm looking forward, hopefully, to be working with you on that in the course of the next number of months in preparing for Budget 2018, because we will want to continue to recognize the particular challenges and opportunities, the opportunities that we see in the North in areas like mining and other industries that have a particular opportunity. So that will be a continuing goal of our government.
Yeah. And Mr. Minister, we are making some progress. I was really happy to see that Chamber of Mines sent us a letter congratulating us for the investment that we're making. We have a choice. We either can provide subsidies to companies, industry, or we could provide infrastructure. We recently met with Chamber of Commerce, Chamber of Mines. They've all stated the preference for us in the Northwest Territories, for in the North, is transportation infrastructure. That will lower the cost. That will provide the investment climate that we need. And we also need to develop our workforce. We have a large, 50% of our population is Indigenous. They need a focus. We need a strategy to deal with that. We have across the country over 150,000 Indigenous people sitting in communities unemployed. And it is really troubling to see that. Indigenous people usually are not, they don't take advantage of projects in another jurisdiction, another province. So we need to ensure that our economic plan is spread across the country, but we may need an Indigenous workforce strategy also. Maybe you could comment on what you would think about that.
Well, I can only, more than anything else, agree with you. Obviously, the investments that we're making on behalf of Indigenous Canadians, both in the North and across the country, are important. They're particularly important in dealing with some challenges that we recognize that are there for the fastest growing part of our population. Challenges like, obviously very different economic outcomes, so a lower rate of income for Indigenous Canadians. Challenges like a significantly lower education attainment that we are trying to and must deal with. And obviously we need to think about first principles. How are people actually living and succeeding, especially in northern areas where the costs are so much higher. So these are important issues that we are working to get at, and again, looking forward to making more progress in the course of the coming months.
Thank you both. Mr. Poilievre, 5 minutes.
Thank you. Have any offices that report to you as minister ever awarded contracts or paid work to a company in which you own shares?
That I don't think deals with the supplementary estimates, Mr.
Actually,
Poilievre.
it does, Mr. Chair. The supplementary estimates provide funding for those same offices, and as a result, the minister is here. He's answering questions about all kinds of other expenditures that the government wants to talk about. This might not be an expenditure he wants to talk about, but the committees don't exist to the pleasure of ministers. So I ask again, have any offices that report to you as minister ever awarded contracts or paid work to companies in which you own shares?
Do you want to answer this question? Because I think I can. Go ahead.
I hold no controlled shares in any company, so that's quite easy for me to say at this stage. What I can say is, to the extent that I had any controlled assets in the past, I had a conflict of interest screen, so I would have no way of answering that question.
All right, thank you. The next question is regarding tax treaties with tax havens. Mr. Minister, when you were asked about the ongoing tax treaty with Barbados and why you hadn't addressed that tax treaty as part of your grand crusade to raise taxes on other Canadians, you said that you didn't want to, quote, throw the baby out with the bathwater. You didn't reveal when you made those public comments that you had formerly been on the board of a company that had relocated its office to
Pierre,
Barbados.
this has nothing to do with supplementaries.
Well, Mr. Chair, the members across the way and the minister in his earlier comments went outside of those bounds as well. So I appreciate that you're narrowing the confines now.
No, and Mr. McLeod's questions did deal with the subs because the reason we're putting the extra money in there is related to the issue he asked the question on.
Okay. Well, Mr.
So
Chair,
stick to the supplementaries if you could.
well, then we'll return to a question that is directly linked to the supplementary estimates. Which is the budgetary framework in which all estimates are funded. So I'll ask the question again, when will the budget be balanced? In what year?
As I've said, we think finding a balance is particularly important.
In what year?
The balance that we're...
One of the, in the rules of orders, repetitive questions can be cut. So you can ask the question in a different way, but I'm not going to allow a series of questions on exactly the same words during this second session because we're going to run out of time. So go ahead and ask it a different way.
On what date will the budget be balanced?
As I've said, our focus is responsibly investing in our economy so we can see growth and doing that in a way that allows us to reduce debt as a function of our economy, which is proving to be extremely successful, showing higher growth than we've seen in a decade, higher growth than the previous government experienced, job growth that hasn't been around for a decade, more families with more confidence than...
This is
Mr. Minister, we're going to try and hold you to the same time as the questioner if we could. Go ahead.
Will the budget be balanced within this decade?
Again, within the time period that we are estimating, we will actually have the lowest debt burden as a function of our GDP in 40 years.
When will we arrive at a day when the deficit is zero? In what year?
We will continue to make investments to get ourselves to a higher growth rate, which is what's been successful. And that has allowed us to be in a much better economic position than we would have been otherwise, with more Canadians being successful and a very responsible fiscal approach.
Is it possible that you just don't know? Because you've been asked about 15 times today when the budget will be balanced, and you've been incapable of providing a year, a date, or even an approximation. There's no shame, Minister, in just saying you don't know. Is that the case? Is it that you just don't know when the budget will be balanced?
What we've said is that we believe that managing our economy responsibly is important, and the accolades from organizations like the International Monetary Fund, the recognition of people like the Organization for Economic Coordination and Development are important to say that, the kind of fiscal policies we're taking, which have led to significant growth, many more jobs, and a very responsible approach to managing down our debt is the right way to go forward. Balanced way of making a difference for Canadians.
Mr. Dussault and then Ms. O'Connell.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci, Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you once again, Minister. I would like to go back to where I left off. The Taxation Act, the Income Tax Act, and your responsibilities as a minister, and the new situation of new technologies. You know that when we established the current basis of our taxation system, Internet didn't even exist. New technologies weren't on the radar, really, and many things have happened since we set up our taxation system. Are you able today to undertake, beyond the Netflix issue, to undertake to review our fiscal regime in the electronic age? Even the Bank of Canada said very recently this week that this is a new reality that has to be dealt with and worked into the regime. And is your department addressing this issue? Traditional physical commerce, on the downtown streets of our communities is no longer the main way of proceeding, and will you look at this? Our economy continues to change, of course, and we will continue to look carefully at how our system is working to ensure that it continues to function well. On a yearly basis, we consider what changes are necessary, what changes we need to make in the budget, and of course, if the economy changes, then it becomes necessary to think through how we can assure that the system continues to work properly. But do you think it's necessary to do this now? Or do you think that the current situation doesn't really call for that today? Well, it's always necessary. It's always necessary to consider how we can truly make sure that the system will work properly. So we do this every year. And that's what we're doing right now. We're now looking forward to Budget 2018 in this regard. Very good. I will look for the 2018 budget then. I'm not sure if you're able to, but for the time I have remaining, I'd like to go back to the tax agreements with Barbados. Do you have any interests in that country in particular? And I'm wondering whether you're aware of the Barbados tax agreement and whether you're aware that it involves a double taxation clause, and do you think we should maintain that clause with Barbados? I have nothing specific to say about Barbados, but what I can tell you is that on a yearly basis, we go over our agreements, which every country we have an agreement with, to ensure that the situation remains positive for Canada. Speaking to the supplementary estimates, please. Well, of course, this is a government appropriation. You certainly can't spend if you haven't got any revenue, and if we have a problem with our revenues, if they're escaping to foreign countries, then that's an important matter to address right here. So, do you agree with the Prime Minister, who today feels that he can make a snap judgment based on newspaper articles whether all Canadians pay their rightful amount of taxes? Do you think that all Canadians pay their taxes appropriately? Can you say so just based on some newspaper articles? No, I can't. I'm not the judge of that. It's not for me to say.
Thank you again. I wanted to ask about the G20 framework working group and the co-chairmanship of this group. And I'm just curious, what are the anticipated benefits for Canada being involved in this group, or what have the results been to date, and what are some of the areas that, obviously if it's a Department of Finance expenditure, I'm assuming it's talking about the economy, and I'm assuming global initiatives. Can you maybe elaborate on some of the work that will be done there and how this benefits Canadians?
Yes, thank you. We co-chair the Framework Working Group at the G20 with India and have done so since 2009. What it does is it allows us to be engaged in the work that the G20 does in thinking about the objectives of the international work that we do together. So as we think about priorities globally, good example would be the priority in China, which was around inclusive growth under their G20 leadership. Of course, we were able to have a really important insight and ability to influence the agenda. Clearly, each president of the year, in that year China, has the overall responsibility, but we're very involved in actually doing the work that gets us to conclude on what we can do together. So our objective is, of course, to encourage other countries to take economic actions which will help in their country, but also, as a result, help the global economy, which will have a benefit for Canadians. So in thinking about how the global economy works, we do help Canadians directly. Our growth rate, while hugely advantaged because of the kind of work we've done over the last couple of years in helping Canadians to have more money directly in their pockets, is also enabled because the international growth rate has improved. And that's part of a work we do together at places like the G20 table. We have Canadian experts who are at that table helping to get to good global conclusions.
Thank you. And then my next question is in regards to the funding to strengthen Canada's anti-money laundering and anti-terrorism financing regime and the FinTrack overall. So what are these enhancements, or what are we anticipating that will strengthen this? Is it updating with new technologies, or again, how is this a change?
This is a very important and continuing initiative. What we're finding is that the bad guys they're out there, and they're getting more and more effective at hacking into any systems that exist. Financial systems are certainly no exception. If you talk to organizations in this country, large and small, you will find a very large number of them that said they've had some concerns around people that have been trying to actually steal effectively money from their organization through cyber means. So we need to stay on top of this. We will continue to invest in protecting our financial architecture, and this is an area, if anything, of increased vigilance, and one that we're also focused on internationally. Because that is, it's critically that we work together with other countries in protecting our financial infrastructure in particular.
Thank you. So it's not just the anti-money laundering, anti-terrorist, it's also just protection of our systems as well and enhancing that security?
Well, anti-money laundering and terrorist financing are a critical part of that. Obviously, having a broad-based, secure financial architecture stops the ability of financial means being gotten by people with bad intent.
Thank you.
Both, Mr. Albus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, I noticed that you have here funding for the financial sector legislative review. I've been hearing, I'm sure many of us here as well have heard the same concerns regarding a Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institution decision to restrict the use of credit unions of using terms like bank, banker, banking. I've written a few times to you in regards to this. So could you enlighten us as to what you've heard through the review in regards to banking terminology?
Yeah, thank you for the question. The use of the term bank or banking was one, of course, that was originally intended around ensuring that consumers could understand what the institution was actually presenting itself as. I think that the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions has been charged with enforcing that act and identified a concern around the use of that term that was becoming more prevalent. We have worked with the credit unions of Canada to move forward on an approach to assure that they can continue to appropriately characterize their business activities using terms that make sense. That's a process that's going on right now. But I'm assured that both the association and the credit unions are comfortable with the approach that we're taking, which will allow us to ensure that they can maintain the appropriate usage of terms that customers have come to associate with their business.
Okay, well, just in terms of consultations, I think you'd be the first to admit that they don't always go the way that they're intended. So when will you be announcing the results of the review, Minister?
I don't yet have a date for you, but as the consultations are ongoing, we will have a date in the not too distant future.
Okay, well, in order to make sure that there is certainty for credit unions, I've actually tabled a private members bill, Bill C-379. I've written to you about it. Minister, it would allow for credit unions to continue to use the term bank, banker, banking, as they have traditionally used over the past 100 or so years. Would you be supportive of that bill?
We, as I've said, we're working through these consultations. I'm not sure your private member's bill will be necessary. I'll consider it when I see it.
Okay, well, just in regards to that, Minister, because you said that the concern is about consumers mixing up the terms of entities that use the term bank. I'm sure you would agree with me that a food bank would not be subject to OSFI's regulation in this regard.
Can I help you in some way? Is there
I just asked you a question. I was hoping you'd answer by.
So I'm clearly not involved in food banks in the country.
I know. It's just, again, it's an entity operating using the term. So I would certainly hope that you would agree that that would be not the intent of the Bank Act.
I think what we've done in this regard is worked together with the Credit Union Association and the credit unions to ensure that we preserve their ability to be an important part of our economy, which they are. And I will continue to make sure those consultations move forward in a way that protects their ability to effectively provide their services to Canadians that seek them.
Okay, well, I certainly won't be offended, Mr. Chair, if he utilizes the exact same language, because ultimately it's about giving the certainty that credit unions deserve so that they can help our local economies. And I hope the Minister would agree that it really shouldn't matter about who gets the credit. It's about doing things right by Canadians. Thank you.
I don't believe there's a question there. Mr. Fergus.
Mr. Chair, sometimes, Minister, it's unfortunate and it's certainly to be regretted that some people are more interested in striking a pose when they ask a question rather than being able to discern an important answer. And one of the answers which you gave, which I think is well worth going over, is in regard to that you said that Canada is now facing a situation, or will be facing a situation, where we'll have the lowest debt to GDP ratio in 40 years. Can you talk about that, and can you talk about why that's important?
Well, what we're obviously trying to.
In the supplementaries.
It came up in a discussion that.
Okay, we'll let
right
it go.
Across the table. I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker.
We'll let one question go on that. Go ahead, Mr. Minister.
I will be short. We will continue to work to be fiscally responsible. What we showed in our fall economic statement is the kind of investments we're making have enabled us to have a growth rate that's in excess of what we expected at this time 6 months ago or a year ago. That, together with our responsible approach on delivering what we want to deliver for Canadians, is allowing us to have a lower and lower debt as a function of our economy. In looking forward in our 5-year time horizon, we see that we'll get to the lowest debt as a function of GDP since 1977. We think this is an important marker to explain to Canadians how successful the policies we put in place have been for them and their families.
Thank you very much, Minister. I also noticed in the supplements, Minister, that we have some funds which are put aside. Je vais dire ça en français, sous le poste horizontal.
Horizontal positions regarding land claims and self-government. Your department is asking for $331,000, and 7 other federal agencies are asking for this to the tune of $100 million. What will these funds be used for? I'd like to have a better idea of the difference between the two. I don't know, maybe Mr. Rochon can answer that question. Thank you. Yes, these amounts, with regard to First Nations, are for negotiations on tax agreements and revenue transfer that we negotiate via those agreements. So there's a whole process with many First Nations, and 8 officers from the department are involved. Do you think we're going to spend this money before March 31st, 2018? Yes, I think so. Thank you very much. Second question. We committed to $11 million in the 2017 budget. We made a commitment to spending $11 billion over 10 years to support home care and mental health initiatives. At the end of the summer, it had been announced that we agreed with the provinces and territories to have a common statement of principle. Once again, this spending was already authorized, but could you explain when this money will be transferred to the provinces and territories? And once again, should this spending take place during this fiscal year? Yes, the amounts will be spent over 10 years. These funds will be transferred to the provinces and territories, essentially. With a framework that the Minister of Health will negotiate with the provinces and territories. I do understand that talks are going well, are progressing, and we expect the funds to be spent within the years anticipated. Even this year, yes, even this year.
Mr. Kamesh, and final questions will go to Mr. Savera. Mr. Pesh,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on devoted appropriations, there's a $30 million line item saying funding for a grant to the Government of Alberta to support provincial actions that will stimulate economic activity and employment in Alberta's resource sector, budget 2017. My understanding is this is going towards Government of Alberta loan project for orphan well remediation. Is that correct?
Sorry. Excuse me, I missed your question part of that.
That was all just a question there. The funding, the $30 million that is being handed over to the Government of Alberta, it says here to support provincial actions that will stimulate economic activity and employment in Alberta's resource sector, budget 2017. Is that going towards the loan program that the Government of Alberta is running to remediate orphan wells?
Yes.
So $30 million to remediate, there are probably billions of dollars in liabilities. How many jobs did you expect this to create?
That of course, is not something that that we did analysis on. This was something that we worked with the Alberta government on, so that they could move forward on the remediation of these wells in a way that would enhance employment, yes, but also get at an issue which is particularly challenging in Alberta.
How did you arrive at the $30 million number?
We worked with Alberta. That was their request.
So Alberta told you $30 million is what they needed from the federal government?
I think what's clear in this case is that Alberta has a long-term challenge in remediating these wells. What's also clear is that Alberta, and of course all of us, want to make sure that we have good employment outcomes in Alberta. So we work together cooperatively.
That's not clear. Sorry, forgive me. I asked the question if the $30 million being assigned here in this appropriation was a direct request of the Government of Alberta, or was it something the federal government officials in your department determined that this was the correct amount to give? And it wasn't clear from your answer, yes or no. Did the government of Alberta ask for this $30 million specifically?
We worked with Alberta. I can't tell you that I know the exact exchange, but of course their request was for these funds in order to help remediate the wells in Alberta.
So it was some sum of money, you're not sure which, and your department came to $30 million at some point.
Well, I'm quite sure it's $30 million, and I'm quite sure that we worked with Alberta. I'm quite sure that our goal was to both help remediate the wells and to have a positive impact on employment in Alberta.
So one of the reasons Alberta has so many more wells to now remediate is because of actions by your government that put businesses out of work, and then they put energy workers out of work, then they return the energy leases with these orphan wells on their properties. And so when you go after the energy sector, you cause the problem and you make it worse. Alberta's always have an orphan well issue, and you've made it worse over the last few years. $30 million doesn't compensate for the loss of Energy East jobs, 14,000 jobs there. It doesn't compensate for Pacific Northwest LNG project in BC. It doesn't compensate for the jobs that would have been created through Northern Gateway. Like $30 million is a drop in the bucket, which is why I'm asking the question, like, who came to the determination that $30 million is the right amount? And I'm still not getting an answer on it, whether it was the federal government that decided this was all that you could spare, even though Alberta gives you $18 billion in equalization transfers, or whether it was the government of Alberta.
We will continue to work with Alberta as we do with all provinces in order to make sure that our country is successful. And I think the impact of the work that we've done for Canada, for Alberta, has been positive. We recognize the challenges faced in Alberta as a result of change in global commodity prices are significant. We will continue to find ways to not only advance the cause of the oil and gas sector in Alberta, but also to broadly advance the cause of Albertans.
Really short.
Question.
Minister, I was sent here by my constituents to deal specifically with things like estimates. No other job here in Canada deals with something like estimates in Parliament. It's the most fundamental job of a parliamentarian. So I am asking you the question, this $30 million you're asking for us to approve, who decided on this $30 million? Was it the government of Alberta or the government of Canada? You've said you've collaborated, you're working with them, you'll continue to work with them, and I'm sure you will, but I'm asking specifically to this amount of money. Who decided on the $30 million? Was it the government of Alberta or was it the government of Canada?
Well, what we're doing is the supplementary estimates for the government of Canada, so we are deciding to approve the Government of Canada supplementary estimates, which means that this is our conclusion of the $30 million. It was, of course, through a process of discussion on how we could best have a positive impact on Alberta, and we're pleased to have moved forward with this.
Mr. Sabara, last question. Questions, 4 minutes you got.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, on our supplementary estimates for 2017-2018, there's some funding put in there, and I think it's about $300 million to provincial governments for home care services and mental health services. I know my colleague referred to that, but in that allocation and the allocations to come for mental health, how important it is for our government to assist those in Canada and the incidence rate of people suffering from mental health issues here in Canada?
Well, we think it's very important. We have worked together with the provinces on this issue. I know that the previous Minister of Health worked together to get the aligned priorities of the provinces around mental health, and I know that the current Minister of Health is working to assure that we have a continued level of collaboration on this issue. Obviously, by earmarking funds directly to mental health, we think that we not only assure that that money goes in that direction, but we provide an impetus for all of the provincial and territorial governments to look at mental health as being important in their jurisdictions. The incidence of mental health challenges is increasing, both as a function of our changing economy and as a function of reduction in stigma. One way or another, demand is increasing, and this is allowing us to get at something that is both important to improve people's health and also important for the long-term health of our economy, which is why it's important in this context.
Thank you, Minister. One final comment. As a new MP, understanding the budgeting process and the estimates process, in our government's desire and process on transparency, and in allowing MPs to fully understand, it's great to see that the alignment between the budget and the main estimates that the Treasury Board Secretary has put forward. So either yourself or Mr. Rochon want to talk about that and how that will improve the process for parliamentarians to understand. I understand with the 2018 budget process.
Yeah, happy to do so. So the objective is to have as many and potentially all budget measures that should be in the main estimates this year. The process that we will use is essentially to delay the main estimates by approximately a month. And in the Budget Implementation Act 2, we're asking for authorities to ensure that departments can continue to contract and have the certainty that they can continue to contract for the time period that's involved between the start of the fiscal year and the tabling of the main estimates. In principle, aligning the two should give parliamentarians a more complete line of sight on the government's fiscal plan as it breaks down by department and by program.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
That'll be it. Then thank you, Minister and Deputy, for appearing before us on Bill C-63 and the supplementary estimates. Committee members will let the Minister go because I know he's got a hard stop at 5:15. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And committee members, we need to vote on the supplementary estimates. So you have them before you. Shall vote 1B under Department of Finance carry in the amount of $31,952,332. All those in favor? Are you awake, Raj? All those in favor? Again? Opposed? Carried on division. Shall vote 1B under Financial Transactions and Reports Analysis Centre of Canada carry in the amount of $420,000. All those in favor? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried on division. Shall I report vote 1B under the Department of Finance and vote 1B under Financial Transactions and Reports Analysis Centre of Canada to the House? Agreed? Agreed. Okay, so with that, we will suspend for a quick minute and bring officials up to deal with the Division 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13, and hopefully we can get it done before the vote. So we'll suspend for a minute. Michelle, and where's these descriptions?
There and right underneath, I believe.
Okay. We'll reconvene, and we have with us to talk about the Economic Action Plan 2015, Act Number 1, Part 5 of Division 9, and with us is Margaret Hill, Senior Director, Labour Program, Employment and Social Development Canada, and Mr. Sadek, Policy Analyst, Labour Program. Floor is yours. Welcome.
Very much. Division 9 of Part 5 is focused on provisions in Part 3 of the Canada Labour Code related to interns, and responds very directly to the government's commitment in Budget 2017 to limit unpaid internships in the federally regulated private sector. It also complements other Government of Canada initiatives to help Canadians, especially youth, to gain work experience in today's reality. As you may know, Part 3 of the Canada Labour Code establishes minimum working conditions for about 900,000 employees in the federal private sector, which includes industries such as banking, telecommunications, and international and interprovincial transportation, as well as most federal crown corporations. Part 3 sets out the rules for things like maximum hours of work, minimum wages, hours of work, scheduling, termination of employment, and also outlines it provides for a number of leaves. So let's focus now on the interns part of this issue. An intern is someone who's in the workplace for a short period of time and is there to learn and develop the skills and experiences they need to enter the workforce. An intern is typically a student who's doing a co-op or some other kind of work placement as part of their college or university program or secondary school training. Interns are also sometimes newcomers to Canada who want to be in the workplace to learn about Canadian work practices. It's also important to recognize that interns can be paid and unpaid. When they're unpaid, this raises a number of concerns about whether they're being treated fairly or even being exploited when they're in the workplace. Often, while an employer may call someone an intern, the individual is actually really doing work for which they should be paid. In 2015, Statistics Canada Federal Jurisdiction Workplace Survey found that there were about 13,000 interns in the federal private sector. The vast majority of these individuals were paid. About just over 2,300 were not paid. The amendments proposed to the code in Division 9 would repeal provisions related to unpaid interns that were enacted in 2015 through the Economic Action Plan and are not yet in force. The 2015 changes to the code established two very limited situations when an intern can be unpaid. The first is if their internship is part of the requirements for a program offered by a secondary or post-secondary educational institution or a vocational school in Canada or abroad. The second is if the individual's internship meets 6 specific criteria, such as it's 4 months or less in duration, the benefits of the internship accrue primarily to the intern, and the intern does not replace an employee, and the internship is not a requirement for a position with the employer. In addition, a provision was introduced to specify that when an intern is unpaid, they are entitled to a modified set of labour standard protections to be identified through regulations. This would include things with respect to maximum number of hours of work, for instance. The amendments being proposed in the current bill would remove the second situation when an intern can be unpaid, and the related regulation-making authorities that go with that second circumstance. The result would be that an intern would only allowed to be unpaid if their internship is part of the requirements for their academic program. Any intern who is in this situation and is unpaid would continue to receive that modified set of labor standards such as maximum hours of work, weekly days of rest, and general holidays that will be established through regulations. I'll leave it with that and welcome any questions.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions on this division, Division 9? No questions. Thank you very much. I am going to jump to, I think Division 10 will take a fair bit of time, so I'm going to jump to Division 11, the Judges Act, if we could. See if we can, we'll leave Division 10 till the end. Division 11, Judges Act. From Justice, we have Miss Crosby. Okay. Ms. Crosby, Senior Counsel, Deputy Director, Judicial Affairs, Court and Tribunal Policy, and Ms. Decker, Counsel, Judicial Affairs, Courts and Tribunal Policy. Floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm here to speak to Division 11 of Part 5, and there are 3 measures reflected in the amendments to the Judges Act that are included here. So the amendments would authorize the salary for a new Associate Chief Justice position for the Alberta Court of Queen's Bench, change the designation of Senior Judge in the Territorial Superior Trial Courts to Chief Justice, and change the mechanism for payment of most annuities under the Judges Act. And I'll briefly describe each of these proposed changes. For the Associate Chief Justice, funding for the salary for this position was included in Budget 2017, and this new position is reflected in Amendment to Section 20 sub C of the Judges Act. With respect to the change in designation of senior judges, in the superior trial courts in the provinces, the head of the court is called a Chief Justice, but in the superior trial courts in the territories, the role is called a senior judge, which the Judges Act currently defines as the judge with the earliest date of appointment. The proposed amendments would align the title in the superior courts in the territories with that which is used in the equivalent courts in the provinces in the equivalent roles. The amendments would repeal the definition and remove all references to senior judge in the Judges Act. A transitional amendment would also ensure that any senior judges who served in that role before the amendments came into force would retain all of their entitlements, even if they didn't get the name change. In terms of annuities, currently all annuities require an order in council be passed before they can be paid. However, the Governor and Council in fact has no discretion on whether or not to grant them. They must be paid. The proposed amendments would streamline the process for payment of all non-discretionary annuities to judges as well as survivors and children. In effect, once the statutory conditions are met, the payments can be made. To implement the change, the proposed amendments would generally change the terminology, which currently uses the words grant, in French, accorder, and it would be changed to that they would be paid or versé in French. That's all I have prepared, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay. Is there any question to the witnesses on this division? Mr. McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. I wanted to say that I'm very pleased to see this change happening. I'm happy that the government is making progress on changing the names from Senior Judge to Chief Justice, and it brings us in line now with the provinces, and we've called for this change for some time now, and we're hoping that our commissioners will also become lieutenant governors at some point also. I think you've done a good job telling us how the changes will affect the judges in the territories. Could you maybe tell us how long this is going to take for it all to come into play? What's the time frame around getting this all done?
So we are collaborating with our counterparts in the territories to ensure these amendments would not actually be brought into force until all of the amendments in the territories would also be brought into force. Those amendments exist, but they have to be brought into force. So as soon as that happens, I can't speak to exact timelines, but it is something that we are actively working on.
If I might just add, in our discussions with the territories, they've indicated that they hope to have it in place by the spring, the reciprocating legislation.
That it? Okay, thank you very much. Let the witnesses go. Division 12, Business Development Bank of Canada Act. Officials from Innovation, Science and Economic Development. I'll read the one. Okay, then we have Mr. Valerio, who's the Director, Small Business Branch. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much. The clause requests or proposes that the Business Development Bank of Canada Act be amended to increase BDC, the Business Development Bank of Canada's paid-in capital limit, to $4.5 billion. The BDC is subject to a paid-in capital limit under the BDC Act. It's currently set at $3 billion. This limit concerns the capital injected into the BDC by the Government of Canada, the sole shareholder. As of March 31st, 2017, the paid-in capital limit of the BDC totaled $2.4 billion. In Budget 2017, the government announced that it is making available nearly $1.4 billion in new financing through the BDC and Export Development Canada to help Canada's clean tech firms grow and expand. As well, Budget 2017 announced the government is making available through the BDC $400 million for a new venture capital catalyst initiative that will increase late-stage venture capital available to Canadian entrepreneurs. To implement these two initiatives, the BDC would require an injection of new capital in the amount that surpasses the current limit of $3 billion. It is therefore proposed to increase the BDC's paid-in capital limit to $4.5 billion to allow the government to inject the necessary capital for the BDC to deliver these Budget 2017 initiatives and for future initiatives or contingencies that may emerge. Welcome any questions?
Thank you. Is there any questions? Tom.
So this is a 50% increase of what you had before in terms of the total equity you could have. When was the last time, I guess, before this when this was increased?
2009 for the stimulus package.
And what was the increase then?
Roughly about the same amount, 1.5 billion.
So it was 1.5 billion, 2009 comes around, another 1.5 billion, and then now another 1.5 billion?
Correct.
And this will be going, you said, to those different programs, so the government, through the BDC, can borrow for these different programs?
Correct.
And in case of any emergencies or bad loans or things that go wrong, you feel this will give you a sufficient amount of money to ensure that you'll have a float?
Correct.
Okay. That's all.
Okay. Just one point for myself, Mr. Valerio. We did ask for the BDC to come. That was who we had asked for, and the response we got back was that I said would make that representation. We run into the same thing last year with ACOA. And I'll just tell you, from my perspective as chair, we didn't have time to get into an argument about it. But when we ask for BDC, we expect BDC, yourself with them, but in the future you can tell them if we ask for BDC, we expect BDC to be here. Okay? Thank you. That's no further questions then turning to division. Oh, I should ask, we got agreement to go till about 10 to 6. The votes are at 6. 26 minutes left. Have we got agreement to move forward? Then Division 13, I believe it is, Financial Administration Act. Mr. Sprecher?
I'm not
Then with the Treasury Board Secretariat on Division 13 Financial Administration Act, Mr. Specker, okay, thank you. Senior Director, Expenditure Management Sector. Go ahead, Mr. Specker.
Merci, bon après-midi.
Thank you and good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here today to introduce to you Section 261, which changes subsection 32(1) of the Financial Administration Act. In order to provide context, in June 2017, the House of Commons approved modifications to the regulation regarding which the main budget could be deferred until the 16th of April at the latest for the two coming cycles, and that could be included in the supplementary estimates material for the primary budget. When it's normally tabled on the 1st of March, at the beginning, before the new year begins on the 1st of April, the government was asked to vote in voted appropriations in a provisional fashion to allow the government to pursue its activities until all the voted appropriations be approved at the end of June.
Its ability to make financial commitments, such as for contracts or contribution agreements, by requiring there to be a sufficient authority in appropriation or in estimates then before the House of Commons. The Deputy of Finance already spoke very briefly about this. These limits are retained in Parts A and B of the proposed amendment. However, to begin the fiscal year 18-19, only the interim estimates and corresponding appropriation will be available until the complete main estimates are tabled, roughly 2 weeks into the new fiscal year. If the government were to leave the FAA as it is now, departments would not be able to reflect the full year's value in the contracts or contributions that they sign on or just prior to April 1st. The proposed addition to Part C to subsection 32(1) of the FAA clarifies departmental financial commitment authorities for the period in between the tabling of an interim estimates in February and the complete estimates, main estimates in April. This will be done by permitting financial commitments to be made against a limit which will be specified in the interim estimates bill. The second proposed addition in Part D clarifies that commitments may be made against the unencumbered balance of revenues actually received by a department or the amount of a department's estimated revenues set out in estimates. The commitment limit will be based on the forecast planned spending, including expected revenues, that is known when the interim estimates supply bill is introduced. In other words, the forecast main estimates before new budget measures are taken into account. To conclude, I would emphasize that these amendments clarify the authorities of departments. They do not add to them, nor do they change their authorities to make payments out of the Consolidated Revenue Fund. Such payments will continue to be limited by the specific amounts set out and voted on by Parliament in the appropriations. And with that, I would thank you for your patience and would be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for your patience, Darrell. I don't know the second or third time you've been here. Is there any questions? Okay, then thank you very much for the explanation and coming several times. So we'll turn. Oops, sorry, Mr. Dussault has one. Sorry, Darrell. Go ahead.
Just to be sure, est-ce que ça s'applique seulement pour
Does this apply only for the coming fiscal year or in the budgetary process now underway, or is this something that will apply in future years? For the coming year and for the year thereafter. But after that, it would no longer be necessary?
If that standing order is or continues on after that period, then that will be necessary as well.
Okay, with that, then thank you very much, and we will bring to the table Division 10, Trade with in Canada and Harmonization of Energy Efficiency Requirements from ISED. Mr. What? No. Mr. Fertuck, who's the Director General, External and Trade Policy Branch, and Ms. Hill, who's the Special Advisor, Strategy and Innovation Policy Section. Welcome and thank you for coming, and thank you for your patience. The floor is yours, who's ever going to make. Go ahead, Mr. Fertuck.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My colleague Melanie Hill, actually, she'll be providing a short explanation of Part 5, Division 10. Over to you, Melanie.
Thank you for having us. To start, I'll just provide a quick background about the Canadian Free Trade Agreement. The CFTA, as it's also known, came into force on July 1st of this year, and it's the successor to the Agreement on Internal Trade, or the AIT. The CFTA commits federal, provincial, and territorial governments to a comprehensive set of rules that will help to achieve a modern and competitive economic union for all Canadians. In order for the Government of Canada to implement certain aspects of the CFTA, associated legislative changes are needed. As such, Division 10 of Part 5 enacts the Canadian Free Trade Agreement Implementation Act. It's based heavily upon the implementing legislation for the Agreement on Internal Trade. The nature of its provisions are mostly administrative. The Act would establish the responsible CFTA minister, facilitate dispute settlement, permit the award of monetary penalties, allow the appointment of committee members and panelists for disputes, and authorize federal funding for the Intergovernmental CFTA Secretariat. Given that the CFTA replaces the AIT, the Canadian Free Trade Agreement Implementation Act would also repeal the Agreement on Internal Trade Implementation Act. In order to further demonstrate federal leadership on internal trade, Division 10 of Part 5 would also propose 3 amendments to the Energy Efficiency Act, or EEA. First, the EEA would be amended to provide the Minister of Natural Resources with the authority to make technical or administrative changes to existing Governor and Council regulations. These changes must be for the purpose of maintaining harmonization with another jurisdiction. Secondly, the EEA would be amended to provide the Governor and Council with the authority to incorporate by reference technical standards documents for the purposes of harmonizing with another jurisdiction. And lastly, Section 26 of the EEA would be repealed, which is a requirement to pre-publish regulations in Canada Gazette Part 1, which is duplicative of a Treasury Board directive. The above changes to the EEA will provide new tools that will allow for the Government of Canada to create consistency in standards across the country and ensure that Canada is aligned with other key trading jurisdictions. Division 10 of Part 5 also proposes consequential amendments to the Financial Administration Act, the Department of Public Works and Government Services Act, and the Procurement Ombudsman Regulations by replacing references to the Agreement on Internal Trade with references to the new CFTA. This division would also repeal the Timber Marking Act. The Timber Marking Act is an outdated federal law from 1870 that applies to only 3 provinces, being Ontario, Quebec, and New Brunswick. It mandates that anyone floating timber on rivers in those provinces must mark the logs and register that mark. As such, it is de facto discriminatory, making it contrary to the non-discriminatory treatment obligation under the CFTA. A formal consultation on the repeal of the Timber Marking Act was held, and all stakeholders who provided comments expressed support for the proposed repeal and did not anticipate any negative impact as a result. Division 10 of Part 5 would be deemed to have come into force on July 1st, 2017, to coincide with the coming into force of the CFTA, providing continuity. The proposed legislative changes contained in Division 10 of Part 5 are not controversial, given that any substantive changes pertaining directly to the CFTA were accepted by provinces and territories during the course of the negotiations, or in the case of the EEA amendments, were the subject of consultations in which industry stakeholders as well as provinces were highly supportive. We'd be pleased to take any questions you may have.
We have Mr. Kamish. The floor is yours.
So I have 2 areas I want to ask questions about, and I'll start maybe with section. Can't find a division here. So it would be appointments, section 17. So it says, section 17(1), the Governor and Council may, by order, appoint any person to fill any position that may be necessary or advisable in the opinion of the Governor and Council. So, but if you look at these other appointments, it's always to appoint a minister or to fill a roster. In this case, it says that basically the Governor and Council can appoint anyone for any positions that they think are necessary or advisable. So my interpretation of this is that the government would be able to appoint as many people to as many roles as the government feels responsible for, and then the remuneration underneath, they would pay remuneration expenses to these people. like how broad is this appointment power? Is there a roster to fill? Are there specific positions that this is related to, or is this just gives the government the power to appoint literally anyone to anything? It seems very broad compared to some of the other sections in this bill, and just more broadly of what I've seen across government.
Thank you for your question. So this appointment authority is brought over from the existing Agreement on Internal Trade Implementation Act. So this wouldn't be a new authority that's being provided. It would just be transitioned from the Agreement on Internal Trade Implementation Act to the Canadian Free Trade Agreement Implementation Act. The authority is generally written in a way that would allow for flexibility for the Governor and Council to, by order, appoint, as you said, any person to fill a position that may be necessary or advisable. At the current point, at this current stage, there's no particular role that we envision would need to be filled using this power, but it obviously is beneficial to build in such an ability, again, through the Governor and Council by order at the recommendation of the Minister or ourselves to make an appointment in order to carry out the agreement. Without this, we could be in a position where we would have to amend the Canadian Free Trade Agreement Implementation Act in order to provide such an ability. So rather than doing that, it seemed wise to carry this forward into the CFTA Implementation Act.
So can I ask then the question, when the agreement was was negotiated, what was the intention of having such a section in there, like to have so the government could appoint at some point like a internal trade czar or to appoint a negotiator? I would assume other sections of that agreement cover that. So what is intended by a section like this to preserve it into the future? I mean, if you haven't used it before, it seems like a just-in-case clause. So I'm just wondering, why should we continue to approve a section like this and give such latitude for the government to appoint whoever they wish, whenever they wish?
So I'd just like to clarify that this appointment ability isn't built into the Canadian Free Trade Agreement itself. So when you refer to negotiations and to adding such a clause, it's irrespective of the agreement itself. But what it is, as I mentioned, carrying forward this existing authority of the Governor and Council by order to appoint someone from the Agreement on Internal Trade Implementation Act into the Canadian Free Trade Agreement Implementation Act. Although, as I said, it's not envisioned how or exactly which role this authority would be used to fill, it is worthwhile having such a provision and maintaining such an authority. I do want to highlight that it's not a new authority.
So just so I could be clear, the Government of Canada, Governing Council, has never made an appointment under this section or its previous version either? It's a section that has not been used?
To my knowledge, no, this authority's not been used, but that's not to say that we wouldn't need it in the future, and it would be wise to have that ability built into the Implementation Act, so not to have to muddy up the bill process to make that amendment, but rather just maintain an existing authority should the case arise in the future.
You don't need to rush, Tom. If we don't finish, we only get this one section left, we can invite the members.
Well, my count, Mr. Chair, 2, 5. I'm all happy to stay here during.
Yeah, you'd be happy. Did you finish your line of questioning?
If there's others who want to ask questions, I have one other thing.
Mr. Fergus, okay. Mr. Albus.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in regards to it, this act allows the Government of Canada to either withhold a benefit or to put in place, impose regulatory measures of equivalent effect under Article 1013 of the agreement. Is that correct? So we are going to be putting the federal government, so there's two mechanisms here. The federal government can impose, now what do you mean by a benefit, withholding a benefit? What kind of benefits would may be taken away if a province or provinces are not complying with their obligations under the agreement? And You can answer that question first.
Thanks very much. So with respect to this provision, Chapter 10 is related to the dispute resolution chapter of the agreement. And one of the incentives that parties agreed on as a way to incent compliance with panel rulings through the dispute process is to both have the ability to award monetary penalties and so ensure that there are monetary consequences associated with not living up to panel decisions, but also until such time as a party has paid up, there is also the withholding of the opportunity for the residents of that party to the agreement to be able to access the dispute provisions. So if someone doesn't pay up, then their citizens can't access the dispute process and go after another jurisdiction.
Okay, and then this also allows for someone to take, if let's say a province does not comply and the federal government decides to withhold benefits, including other disputes to come forward, they can apply to a federal court. Is that correct? So there's two methods. You can go to the Governing Council or you can go to a federal court for a court order. Is that correct?
So it could be done using either the CFTA or federal law.
Okay. So again, an individual could take their case to a federal court if they weren't getting satisfaction from either the Governing Council or from just compliance with the trade with the panel decision. Is that correct?
It would be the suspension of benefits or the retaliatory measures that would be done using either the CFTA or federal law. The CFTA Chapter 10 dispute resolution processes have to be used for any CFTA-related disputes, not federal courts. Apologies if I misspoke, but the point I made about federal law, federal court, was with respect to these suspension of benefits or imposing retaliatory measures.
Okay, thank you.
We have two questioners, so we are going to have three questioners, so we're going to have to invite you back. I'm sorry for that. You're okay, Mr. Dussault? You have a long question? Okay. So we will have to scramble for votes, so we will find... Are members okay if the witness come back before we start clause by clause? It's past the deadline for amendments, but are you okay if we...
The only other option is tomorrow.
You okay with that? So it'll be on, we'll bring them back just as we start clause by clause, and that's on Monday the 20th, Tuesday the 21st. Okay, with that we will have to adjourn.